for a plant to bloom, it must be cared for, be nurtured as a seed. But you must determine the potential of the seed. Some may view the plant as a weed, an eyesore that strips resources from their garden. Others see a beautiful flower, something worth growing, something that may benefit the future. With its rolling hills and pristine beaches, Block Island is the perfect attraction for those who want an escape to paradise. With its historic main street and peaceful aura, many people see Block Island as just a vacation destination. Yet the truth is, Block Island is on the cusp of an energy revolution. Located off the southern coast of Rhode Island, Block Island is in the prime position for offshore wind energy. With a growing need for alternative energy, the state of Rhode Island has capitalized on the abundance of wind near the shores of Block Island by creating the first offshore wind farm in America, the Deepwater Wind project. The world is at a crossroads. With the last decade being the warmest on record, it has never been more important for governments around the world to take action on finding solutions for climate change. This all starts with the education of the future leaders of our society. The Greene School senior class is investigating potential energy solutions to global climate change. Throughout our expedition, Our Place by the Sea, we examined the newly built Block Island wind farm and whether or not it is the best financial, social, and environmental solution. By speaking to a variety of expert speakers and Block Island residents, we were able to account for the many different viewpoints of the wind farm, from those in favor to those who believe a different approach should be taken. We started this inquiry process by asking the most basic questions surrounding this technology. Who farms the wind?
I think like a lot of people, I have a lot of mixed feelings, a little ambivalence about the wind farm. So I believe it's important that we have a transition to cleaner sources of energy. I think there's a lot of good resources offshore, and I think it's important that the U.S. is at least dipping a toe in the water, if you will, around offshore wind and seeing that experience and seeing what's happened. I do also feel, if you've been to Block Island and you've walked up the little hill by Southeast Light and you are confronted by the wind farms, they're very large, right? It is a very big change on the environment, and so there are real impacts. And that's part of what makes it interesting to me, is understanding how people perceive those impacts and where those beliefs and opinions come from.
That's a really good question, because offshore wind turbines, as you know, here in Block Island, are the very first offshore wind turbines in the whole country. And so this is all brand new for everybody.
We felt a particular sense of responsibility because it's in our backyard. We were both rooting for it, and we're cautious about it as well, and I'll tell you why. But we wanted it to go well because really the eyes of the industry and the eyes of the world were looking at this particular project to see how it would go. It's really a template, by the way. This is a pilot program, if you will, for other offshore wind farms to be built in the country.
The offshore wind farm?
Yes.
Well, I have opposed the offshore wind farm from its inception, and on several different levels. I had written grants from the power company for an undersea cable as long ago as 25 years to go from Westerly, Rhode Island to Block Island under the channel. I felt that that was the best application to get power to Block Island, as we're on diesel fuel at the current time in generator.
I think we're always concerned when you're putting something foreign into something natural on what the impacts of that will be. And I think that we're always very aware of making sure or wanting people to make sure that we're not putting those things at risk.
As far as the wind farm is concerned, I think that I'm all in favor of getting energy from natural sources. And I think the wind farm is a wonderful thing. There's a huge lot of wind that keeps hitting my houses, and it's better put to use this way.
Thousands of years ago, glaciers pushed across the planet, creating rolling hills and leaving behind glacial deposits. This activity eventually formed what is now known as Block Island. For the island's first 200 years, its normal condition was isolation. Block Island's first inhabitants were the Manaceans. They created a small community on the island as early as 1300 BC and referred to their island as Manacees, which translates to Little Island of Manitou. Here is Lauren Spears speaking about the Manaceans.
They had some differences because island life causes you to have differences. In that they did a lot more seal hunting for clothing and materials that we used more deer for on the mainland. They used more seal on Block Island. But in lots of other ways, being a coastal people, they, hunted and fished and canoed and lived off the land, and their life ways were based on that.
While the island was first sighted by navigator Giovanni da Verrazzano in the early 1500s, European contact was not made with the islanders firsthand until nearly 100 years later.
There were wars that happened, particularly once European contact came involved. There was farming, if you will, for gardening and things like that. So there was, life happening. There's families and communities living life, doing their jobs, and then socializing and enjoying each other and having spiritual ceremonies and things like that, just as we all do: birth, death, marriage, other kinds of spiritual ceremonies throughout their day. So all of those things are incorporated in your life.
The island would later be named after the Dutch voyager who first visited, Adrian Block. Early on in the 1600s, Europeans used Block Island as peaceful trading grounds. However, within these first years of the new century, the Manaceans were attacked by the European settlers. The conflict ended with a scarce population of the land's original people and the ownership of the island transferring to Englishmen. This led to the creation of new plans for the terrain. The construction of new harbors in the following years enabled the growth of the island's fishing industry tremendously. As hotels began emerging on Block Island, New Englanders from the mainland began to take interest in building summer homes there. Tourism soon became a profitable market. Life today on the island sees few year-round residents. By the time winter rolls around, hotels tend to be vacant, and all but half a dozen buildings close for the season. The population drops dramatically, from thousands to barely 1,000. Such extremes make powering Block Island a complicated task. However, Block Island has been making strides throughout the years when it comes to energy usage. So, what exactly has changed over the years? Block Islanders used to burn wood for fuel to heat their homes and light their paths. They were reliant on wood, but did not use it sustainably. The islanders eventually cut down almost all the trees, leaving them with a need for a new energy source. So how did Block Islanders get their power fix after they cut down all the trees? Whaling. Eventually, society moved past whale power, and so did Block Island. The island moved from whale power to generators. More specifically, diesel generators. Why would such a beautiful, environmentally conscious island use energy as dirty as diesel? Cost. It costs less to transport diesel over to the generators than it does to connect to the mainland power grid. However, Block Islanders may pay anywhere from 40 to 50 cents per kilowatt hour during the summer, much more than anywhere on the mainland. The island's power is also relatively spotty, with outages being fairly common outside of the summer months. Clearly, they need a new solution.
David Milner, from the Block Island Power Company has more insight on this.
Well, as I said, we are not going to be producing power any longer. So the biggest benefit to the whole community is being able to shut down these diesels and not running diesel power. As far as the economics of it is concerned, at this point, we're going to be almost a wash between where we are right now, which is around 34 cents a kilowatt hour. Big portion of that is the fuel surcharge. Once the fuel surcharge goes away, then we replace that with purchased power. So now we have to buy our power from ISO New England. So the amount that we're paying for fuel right now versus what we're going to be paying by buying power, going to be almost a wash. So as it stands right now, I don't think there's going to be any reduction to the power bills to the individual people on Block Island. However, if this had been 2 years ago and we got rid of the fuel surcharge where it was at that point, there would have been a huge savings. That savings has already been there because the price of fuel has dropped so much in the last 2 years.
Block Island is ready for a new chapter in its energy life. With the start of the wind turbines and the new connection to the mainland power grid, the island can finally reduce its carbon footprint. The wind turbines provide a more reliable energy source and connection to the mainland. Now, Block Island doesn't have to rely on diesel energy to power itself. They can enjoy clean energy without the risk of brownouts because of their new connection.
At that point, it started out, the first genesis of the idea was a couple hundred turbines around Block Island. Now, we can all look at that, sort of cringe and say, oh, maybe that's not the best way to go. Well, Deepwater Wind came in. There were seven companies altogether. Deepwater came in and said, well, let's approach this in a different way, not try and splash 200 turbines around Block Island, because that's, difficult, not only logistically, but from a public relations point of view. But we don't want to do it on a large scale initially. We want to start out small, take baby steps. And when you're making mistakes, they're not enormous mistakes with millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in repercussions and potentially very catastrophic public relations consequences. But take it as a demonstration project, step by step, and work it out so that you incorporate all the stakeholders in a project. And stakeholders can be a very broad net that you cast. It's not only the governmental agencies, both state and federal governmental agencies, but also stakeholders like the Block Island residents, stakeholders like the fishing industries, stakeholders like the maritime activity, other associated maritime activities around there, the sailors, stakeholders like the folks who are concerned about the marine mammals, the right whales and so forth. And the state undertook what was called the OSAMP plan, the Ocean Special Area Management Plan, which, in very short description, to engage with as many stakeholders as possible and develop what's essentially a zoning map of the ocean. It says, okay, this is where we have transportation lanes for large cargo carriers, and these are areas where particularly good fishing, and these are areas that are very sensitive benthic ecology, and these are times of years in different places where there's marine mammal migrations and so forth, and we want to be cautious of that. And these are areas where we can utilize our resources, our marine access in such a way to benefit the state and the country and the world in such a way without negatively impacting other uses and other interests. So it started out as demonstration, and it remains a demonstration project. It's small in scale, but it's very significant in the broader implications of setting the bar very high for the industry as we move forward.
After negotiating and recognizing zoning laws, Deepwater Wind began construction on 5 wind turbines in late 2014. The wind farm came fully online at the end of 2016, about a 2-year turnaround from start to finish. The turbines have created over 300 jobs in Rhode Island and lowered the cost of powering Block Island. Even after completion, Deepwater Wind has pledged to stand by their project to ensure that the ecosystem, wildlife, and people who call Rhode Island home are not negatively affected by the turbines.
we picked piles and stabbed them into the base sections. The piles actually hold the wind turbines in place. They go into the earth and hold it in place.
Okay. How many hours did you put into the wind turbines?
So it was 7 days a week, 12 hours a day for just about 3 months for me.
Do you think that green jobs are better than any other jobs in your business?
I don't think they're any better or any worse. It's just another job. Hopefully, it keeps putting guys to work. I mean, I think green jobs are better in the aspect that they're getting away from fossil fuels. But other than that, I think the job is a job.
What are the opportunities for jobs that have been created that you are aware of due to these wind farms?
There's been the construction of the wind farms themselves have created a vast number of jobs for almost every trade in the construction industry. It put a lot of guys to work in Rhode Island, a lot of guys to work on the East Coast and in Jersey. So hopefully it'll keep, the more green energy jobs, the more guys will go to work and keep the economy going, because that's what it's really all about.
How difficult would it be to work in your shoes?
It is a difficult job. It is a high-stress job. I think, if applied and with the proper training, anybody can do it. But you need to be trained, you need to go to school, and you need to work well in high-stress situations. But it's a great job.
Is your line of work dangerous at all? Was the offshore wind turbine construction any more dangerous than any other job that you've taken part in?
My line of work is very dangerous. The offshore wind farm was probably the most dangerous job I had been on, but not because it was unsafe, but being out on the ocean is a different animal altogether. There's very, very high winds. You have to play the waves, so to speak. Everything moves. You can go overboard. There are many. It's very, very dangerous out there. I would do it again, but it is extremely dangerous out there for sure. You got to be on your toes every step of the way, for sure.
Was the amount of money in both labor and equipment in this project spent well?
I feel it was. The equipment was in good condition. The money that was spent, the entire job was very efficient. We got done basically from beginning to end in, I think, just either 2 years or just over 2 years, which is very, very good. The job went very well, for sure. I think the money was well spent.
Are wind turbines built well enough to withstand their 20-year life?
Absolutely. Most. The ones that are out on Block Island are, I don't know if you've been out there, they're massive. They're massive. So I think they will stand the test of time, their 20-year limit, for sure. I think so.
What's your personal opinion on wind energy, or just clean energy?
Whatever's better than fossil fuels, man. We got to get away from fossil fuels for sure. If wind energy is the start of that, then I'm all for it, for sure.
Do you have any other comments?
No, I don't. It was a great interview. Thank you very much.
Brian Wilson will explain what this energy farm can do by the numbers.
We're starting out with 5 turbines, each one 6 megawatts. So they operate from a range of 6 to 56 miles an hour. And they have, for much of that range, they can produce at peak capacity, which is 6 megawatts. So we're by state law limited to 30 megawatts for this particular project. So there'll be no additional expansion on in the Block Island Wind Farm, but there will hopefully be additional wind farms built up and down the Northeast Corridor, including our next step, which is Deepwater Wind. The turbines themselves are set on jacketed structures that are based on technology that's been utilized in the Gulf for decades. It's basically 4 legs that go down to the ocean floor, and then there's pilings that are driven through those legs that go down 200 feet below the seabed to anchor the foundations down. Then the monopiles of the jackets, which you typically associate with wind turbines, are put on there. The nacelle, 450-ton nacelle, is put on top of that, and the 28-ton blades are put on there. It's an enormous. These are enormous machines, and they're beautiful, elegant, reductionist engineered machines. But they are the largest commercially available turbines in the world right now. There's other larger ones in development, but these are the largest that actually are out there working in the ocean.
Seniors at the Greene School traveled around Rhode Island to answer the essential question: who farms the wind? We focused on why people feel the way they do about the wind farm, whether it be positive or negative, and investigated any possible impacts the community may face as a result of the turbines. Block Island is a home for some, a getaway for others. Despite its small size, it's certainly a big part of Rhode Island's culture.
Sail away on the Block Island ferry, take a trip back to carefree times. Be today, Block Island awaits you, just leave your troubles behind.
So I've lived on Block Island now for about 4 or 5 years full time, and it's like a bimodal kind of living. In the summer, it's insane with people, way too many people, but and then in the winter, there's a population of just under 1,000, and it's very quiet and intimate and stormy. And in the summer, it's very noisy and busy, and just constant people everywhere. So it's an interesting way to live, but I love Block Island. It's the most beautiful place I've ever been, and I've been all over the world.
This is our story. It's not the Providence Journal story. It's not the Westerly Sun's story. This is the Block Island Times' story, because it's literally right here on the island, or just 3 miles off the island. So yes, we broke a lot of stories that were positive for the wind farm project. Some stories that were not so good for the wind farm project in terms of delays that happened, closing of an old fishery off the mainland coast that was in the pathway of the cable that was being laid down. The cable has been a topic of conversation on Block Island for decades, because we haven't had one, and we don't have fiber optics. We don't have cable television on Block Island. We have direct TV, things like that. So the cable itself has been a topic of conversation for 30 or 40 years. So people have been very favorable to the idea of getting the transmission cable, which does include some fiber optics for town use specifically. So that was always a positive aspect of the thing. But now that it's in again, and the electricity will be traveling back and forth, it's just again part of life now.
Now, here is Mary Jane Balzer and what she has to say about the offshore wind farm.
Well, I have opposed the offshore wind farm from its inception, and on several different levels. I had written grants from the power company for an undersea cable as long ago as 25 years. That would have taken care of several things. It would have given us power to the mainland. It would have given us view shed, because all of the poles would have been gone. Transformers would have been on the ground. And it would have also given us a grid that was safer than the others, because it's the #1 problem on the island. And that's not going to be resolved with the windmill project. #2, it was very cost effective. Payback was almost instant. To this point right now today, in order to put that undersea cable into the ground instead of the windmill project that's out there, would have been approximately $30 to $35 million. Now that's not even the interest on that money that we borrowed in order to have the windmills offshore. So my feeling on the project was, financially, the cost far outweighs anything Block Island is going to gain, because our power, I do not believe, will be cheaper. I believe it will be more expensive. And that is the basic reason why I opposed the wind farm to begin with.
Block Island Power would have never been able to afford to put a cable to the mainland. It was just way out of what we could afford to do out here. We were already one of the highest rates in the country. If we'd have had to pay for the cable and throw it on top of it, it would have been just astronomical. So it never would have happened. Thank God that they decided to put the turbines out here, and they got all through with all of that, because once Deepwater Wind stepped in and got all the permits from the state to do this, they paid for the cable coming, well, National Grid did, paid for the cable coming out here, and now I have my extension cord, so I can plug into the mainland and start drawing power, shut off my engines, stop burning fossil fuels to produce power, and it's a win-win for the island, without any doubt, and for this company.
So the idea of stabilizing electrical costs is very, very important to the island. We will still continue to pay relatively high costs associated with as opposed to the mainland, just because there's the additional dynamic, the additional infrastructure out here, and the distribution system that we have out here, and certain things that we have to pay for that are above and beyond the mainland. But those costs will be lower than historical highs, and they'll also be stabilized, which is a very important thing.
In addition, the fishing industry has received a boost, as various marine life have flocked to the turbine bases.
Have the bases of the offshore wind turbines impacted fish populations around them?
Yes, very favorably. Where there were just, like occasional fish, it tends to aggregate them. And because, even before the actual construction, those bases were in the water for a year. They had marine growth, had accrued. And, I've been out there. I tend to, when the fishing is really good, we stop early and we'll go by that wind farm. The fishing is particularly bad. We'll stop before the end of the day. I'll say, hey, the fishing's awful. Would you like to go see the wind farm? And most of the customers say yes. So I was there, pretty much twice a day during the construction and then after. And I have seen on my fish finder, which is a sonar, fish sounder, gigantic schools of fish that I would never have seen there if it wasn't for those 5 bases.
So in 2007, we began the process of researching and determining first, how do the people of Rhode Island use these ocean resources? So we did research on where are the fishermen fishing. We looked at where do people sail and where are the shipping routes. We also looked at how does our wildlife use these offshore resources, such as the endangered species, the right whale, the humpback whale, seals. We also looked at what are the migration patterns of the birds out there.
You're going to find a whole lot of folks in 20 years who will be very upset when those artificial reefs are mandated to be removed, because they will become part of the fishing activity, the fishing zones around Block Island.
As with most every form of renewable energy, the environment benefits greatly. Meteorologist Judy Gray from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration focuses on the many benefits wind turbines can bring to Block Island.
I really like the idea of the wind farm. I think that as a nation, we really have to think about our long-term future. And all of the, or most of the resources that we've been using for power generation are limited resources. And in fact, we've gotten to the point where we're fracking for oil, which is ridiculous, and we're causing earthquakes in the Midwest, where the fracking is ruining water supplies. And by the way, water is probably our most precious resource, as it being essential for life, even more than oil. And so I think that turning to alternative energy sources that work with nature instead of against nature is a really important step for us to take as a nation. So I'm really in favor of it. Think about how little environmental impact or negative environmental impact these wind turbines have, especially offshore like this. They mostly has a positive impact. I think we need to continue to assess the impacts on things like migrating birds, but all of the research that has been done on the Block Island Wind Farm has shown that it's the issues are not problems. They're just things we need to keep track of. And I'm really proud of us. I love the saying that we're the smallest town and the smallest nation, or smallest town and the smallest state in the nation, and yet we're the first ones with an offshore wind farm. Very proud of it.
Proud of her state for being the first to support offshore wind turbines in the U.S., Miss Gray is all for YIMBY, yes in my backyard. No matter how obstructive wind turbines may be for some people, she only desires a clean method of producing energy to power towns with as little drawbacks as possible. Local resident Chen Yang had this to say about the wind farm.
As far as the wind farm is concerned, I think that I'm all in favor of getting energy from natural sources. And I think the wind farm is a wonderful thing. There's a huge lot of wind that keeps hitting my houses, and it's better put to use this way. My house is on a hill, but it doesn't really see the windmills. I don't see anything wrong with it. I've been to a number of places where there are lots of windmills, and I think that if it's serving a purpose, it's wonderful. I have no objections to windmills.
But how does the Block Island Power Company feel about this new source of energy? According to the company's vice president and general manager, David Milner,
very, very much in favor of them, and mainly because it gave me my extension cord to the mainland. My whole here, I don't care, I shouldn't say this, but I don't really care whether the wind turbines ever produce any power. The benefit to this company is that we have a cable to the mainland, and it's a win-win for the island, without any doubt, and for this company. Just that I really do think this is such an exciting project, because the watching these things be constructed, watching them put in place, watching this whole thing from day one when they started it, and the period of time that it's taken to do this whole thing is just phenomenal. You can't imagine having a project of the size of that is going on to be done in the few years that this has been done. I think the coordination of it, the National Grid's coordination, Deepwater's, our own, I think has been really, it's a great experience to go through.
If we are going to see a real change, everybody has to be on board. Without the support of everyone, from the government to fishermen, from mainlanders to islanders, the Deepwater Wind project would have never been successful, and the future of wind energy would be at a standstill. Our essential question, who farms the wind, has one answer. Everybody farms the wind. Stakeholders, those who use the energy, and everyone in between all have part in this process. These are the people that make the offshore wind farm possible.